Hi, ladies. Hey, I want to go over with you week 25. I'm excited about what's happening in Women of Valor. You are getting close to the end. You're really going to do your final weeks here, and you have turned a corner now. I pray that the Bible study that you did together, weeks 19 through 24, was good and beneficial. I want to share with you that you're getting ready to go into the final stretch of Women of Valor. And I think typically that is a time when sometimes it's hard to finish the marathon. Remember, you're running a marathon and not a sprint. We've talked about that, but I think there comes a time when it gets weary and tired. You've been doing really well, but you need to really encourage your women, remind them that even when things are not necessarily exciting or new, you want to continue and endure to the end. He has started a good work in you and he will bring it to completion. So encourage your women, keep the course. The other thing that happens in week 25 is we're going to do a shift from the focus on us to the focus on others. Remember, the ultimate purpose of Women of Valor is to go and make disciples. So we are going to look at shifting from maturing in our spiritual growth and how important that is to begin to help others in their spiritual growth. You're come to a point where it's not all about us and growing in us, but helping others, and what that really looks like. If our purpose is to go and make disciples, to finish that program and go into the next leg of this, we must really begin to shift our focus away from ourselves and onto others and what God has called us to do. So that's where you're going with these women. All right, so week 25, I'm going to encourage you to get 3 things out. I have sitting in front of me the Leader's Guide. It gives a lot of good instruction for week 25 on page 43. All right, then we have the lesson sitting in front of us, and your lesson here is again going to show you how to do the large group this week. You're going to spend a lot of time in the large week group because you're going to a new unit, and then you also have your timed outlines, which will help you. All right, so look at all of those and then make a decision how you want to go through week 25. On week 25, you're going to start the unit on His story. The women are going to begin to tell the testimony of what God has done in their lives. So what you're going to do is you're going to get them together as a large group. Please think ahead and go over the lesson so that you can be prepared yourself. You as the leader, or you can draw in some of your mentors to work with you on this, but you're going to go through week 25, and in the lesson, it is all the questions that you would want to ask yourself when writing His story in your life. As a leader, you need to understand what you're doing with this, because testimonies can sometimes be very intimidating, and women don't want to tell their story. But this again takes the focus off of them, and the focus is on God and what He has done in our lives. And so we're really making Jesus famous. We're specifically pointing out places that we can see Jesus in our lives. After the testimony unit, they're going to be asked to go and make disciples with someone in particular. And so they need to have a story themselves. We want to tell people about Jesus, and we want them to understand who He is. The best way for them to do that is to have somebody to relate to. If they can see God in my life, then they can understand God better. They may not have moved into a spiritual realm where they're understanding the big concepts of God, but they see me, they understand me, and I can tell them about the life transformation God has done for me. Then comes the connection between their relationship and God. We're in between that by telling our story. So if you look at the Leader's Guide, it will show you on there that may need a visual. And so I put a picture on there, and what I've done sometimes is taken a big piece of paper and put it across the wall, maybe like 6 or 8 feet on the wall, and put a timeline of my life, birth to death, and then the place of my salvation. And so you can have them, you can go through personally, or you can have one of your other leaders do it, go through and put on that timeline significant places between where they are now and their birth where they've seen God show up. Maybe that's a point of salvation. Maybe for me it was a call to ministry. Maybe it was a point when I saw God just really begin to move in my life, and maybe I wasn't even saved yet. But begin to reflect on the places where they can see God's thumbprint clearly on on their lives. And so you can do that, in front of the room and talk about your own testimony, and I've also had give them little strips of paper and let them kind of begin to think through as you're talking, or write on that as well. And that's just something that you can do for a visual in your large group. But be prepared for that. Begin to reflect on your own life as a leader. Where have you seen God's hand in your life? And where have you seen, like, he showed up there, maybe even before you knew him. He had his hand on that point in my life. And then it brought me to the point of salvation. And then since salvation, there's still, especially if they've been saved very long, there's still room for what have we seen God doing. He didn't quit at salvation. That was the start of our faith journey. Where have we seen God work? And then, more importantly, not more importantly, but as important, is where you are now. What dream or vision has he put in your life that you haven't attained yet, but you're doing a faith walk to get there? And so that timeline is a good visual in that. All right, so talk about them. Sometimes I've had women come in and give their testimony. Again, it needs to reflect his story in their life. You're not telling your story. You're telling his story. You're reflecting Jesus through your story. All right, so just keep that in mind. It's his story, and that's what the lesson is named. And then in your lesson, you have there scripture to go over with the women. You also have, in the first part of scripture, talking about testimony and what it is, how they will know us by the blood of the Lamb and the testimony of our lives, and how key that is in helping people understand who God is. All right, and that's on page 63. And then you're going to have them writing their testimony. There's a list of 11 questions that they're going to answer. Sometimes women get it seems so big. Writing out your testimony seems like such a big thing. But what you're doing this week in their homework, all they're going to do is go through and answer the questions. They can number 1 to 11 and answer the questions, all right? You and a large group are going to go over these questions with them, point them back to the scripture. So when they get to their homework this week, they've already are familiar with what the questions are going to be and how to answer them according to their own life and their answers. So go over that with them in the large group. Use your answers if you'd like, but remind them they are not writing out their testimony this week. They're just answering the questions in their homework. That should free them up a little and not feel as overwhelmed with writing out their testimony. They're just going to answer the questions. They're going to go through the scriptures, answer the questions. That's what they're going to do this week. All right, so that's what you're doing in a large group. Bringing them together, start talking about testimony, his story in our lives, why we need to have a testimony, why we need to understand, why people need to understand who God has been in our lives so they can understand God better. Again, it's not as scary if you're not so worried about people focusing on you, but people are focusing on God, all right? So you'll go through all that in the large group. If you have time, you might want to get into your small groups, have them begin to pray over each other. Maybe if there's women that are feeling unsure about doing the testimony, have them pray over them. Make sure everybody understands what they're doing. Again, you'll have a new memory verse because it's an odd week. So you want to go over the new memory verse, any soaps that they've been doing, and ready to go on lesson 25. All right. So I will come back for lesson 26 prep, but 25, read over your leader's guide, your timed outline, and your lesson, and be prepared to go walk on the journey with these gals. You're going to be telling his story in your life as well, and you're going to encourage them to do the same. It's going to be a great tool for them to go and make disciples.